is the opportunities to invest, are things happening in there. We have with us today the Executive Director, Technical Services of the Rural Electrification Agency in Nigeria, Engineer Barka Sajou. Thank you so much for coming. Please, a round of applause, if you don't mind. We know how tight it was for you to get here, so thanks for coming. Also on the panel will be Izilein, the Senior Advisor to the CEO of the Rural Electrification Agency in Nigeria. Thank you very much for coming. And big thanks to the REA. I'll still talk about the REA when we start, to appreciate what you guys are doing for Nigeria. Then we have with us the CEO of Okra Solar, Afnan Hannan, joining us this afternoon. We also have from PowerGen Renewable Energy, the commercial development lead, Fahari Mwabaya. Thank you so much for joining us. And finally, my friend and my brother, Olugbenga Ajala, CEO of Ashipa Electric. Thank you so much. Nigeria has been on almost everybody's mind in terms of off-grid solar and the ramping up of renewable energy developments. I'll also mention the role that the Rural Electrification Agency has played. I mean, as an industry player, we appreciate that government agency that has come to really open up the market for many players to come in. A typical example, and of course I'll allow the executive director to talk more about this. One of the star programs, the Nigerian Electrification Project, is also setting the pace for other markets in Sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, the development of one of the best mini-grid policy framework around Africa is also spearheaded by this agency. Without wasting too much time, I would like to call on the Executive Director, Technical Services of the Rural Electrification Agency in Nigeria, Engineer Barka Sajou, to come set the scene, and then we'll take up the discussion thereafter. Yes, sir, if you want to come or if you want to sit down, yeah, feel free.
Thank you very much, Segun. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm not sure if the deck will be controlled from there. Some background information. Okay, while they're still trying to queue up the slides. There we go. Yeah, thanks. So as introduced, my name is Barka Sajou. I'm Executive Director, Technical Services at the REA. Thanks to the organizers for having us here. I think this is an important engagement where we get to share some of the work that we've been doing at the Rural Electrification Agency and the opportunities that exist in Nigeria. Next slide, please. So I'll just touch a bit on the electrification outlook in Nigeria to set the context, and then I'll tell you about what REA represents, and then just delve into the business opportunities, the investment opportunities that the Rural Electrification Agency is leading on. We've got various programs. As we get on, I'll talk about the scope and the funding and business opportunities. So as Segun has introduced already, Nigeria is the 7th most populous country in the world. Of course, the issue of electrification is a very, very serious one because 90 million Nigerians are without access. That's quite significant. And there is a large part of this 90 million that actually look to self-generation to be able to have basic electricity. And of course, this presents an opportunity for decentralized energy solutions. Of course, because you would agree with me that that's the fastest way to be able to connect most of these people Nigeria is a very, very large country in terms of land space. So drawing the lines to some of these locations does not make economic sense. According to a World Bank report, there is a $20 billion investment opportunity in Nigeria and a revenue opportunity of up to $8 billion. Next slide, please. So, yeah, there's been talk about the rural electrification and all of that. The Nigerian Rural Electrification Agency is a government agency that is really all about just providing electrification to underserved and unserved communities in Nigeria. And we've done this over the years by extending the grid, but with the proliferation of renewables, we have been approaching this through decentralized energy solutions. We've got, thank you. So we've got a target that we've set for ourselves on the back of the targets that government has set for us for 10 million connections over the next 7 years. In terms of strategy, the way we go about this is to play a significant role in terms of coordinating all the efforts. To scale up, essentially, there are 3 ingredients that you need to pay attention to. First is to get a credible pipeline of projects. And second is to look at, expertise, the competence to be able to deploy. But the most important one is the reason why we're here. You need the right investments to drive the scale up of connections. So REA plays this through these 5 pillars, where we provide coordination of all of the efforts from private sector to the public sector. And then we try to create, a sustainable market, meaning we look at ways to pilot projects where we, with the goal of de-risking them so that they can become templates for scale up. There is the focus on underserved and unserved communities like I've spoken about. And of course, there's the focus on people, the expertise to actually drive this. So this is a snapshot of the programs and the opportunities. We've got 10 of them that we've highlighted here that are of interest at this point. There are much more than this. I'll talk about this in detail in the next slides. So just taking one after the other. I'm sorry if you can't see very clearly, but I'll speak to them. So we have the biggest project, which is the Nigerian Electrification Project, a World Bank and AFDB facility of 550 million USD, and is focused on providing connections to rural communities that are underserved by use of solar home systems, mini grids, and some focus on productive use of energy. In terms of delivery, we've already access to 5 million 140 billion to commercial banks, and available the cash for lending to mini grid developers. Here, there's also the opportunity for private capital to be able to scale up the delivery of this project. We have an impact fund called the Rural Electrification Fund, which was seeded by the federal government. But over the years, we focused on providing calls, like procurement processes to deploy projects. Because of the social angle to this project, we have provided matching grants of about 50% for private developers to also go in and actually deliver on these connections. Thinking about restructuring the fund, and I think this is also an opportunity for strategic investors and DFIs so that we could set up the fund that is much more able to attract more private capital. So I think this is the last slide. Dr. Segun, please bear with me. We have something that is focused on economic clusters called the Energizing Economies Initiative. Now, in this case, it's purely led by the private sector, where we identify markets and actually carry out studies and audits to develop credible project pipeline. We've been working with Rockefeller on this. They've provided some funding and technical assistance, and we're trying to develop the pipeline of projects. Recently, we've been able to attract $5 million from Rockefeller as well for a program called Energizing Agriculture. Of this 90 million Nigerians that are without access, a significant number of them are into farming of different type. So it is only sensible to look at something that focuses on, the mainstay and improve the economic outlook. In this, we are also looking for concessionary finance and any type of finance that would also, deliver on this, whether it's MES or debt and private equity. We have the UNDP program, the African Mini Grids program. I think this is spread across 18 countries, and Nigeria is one of such countries, where we have been able to secure about $6 million. And the goal here is to demonstrate, I think, about 25 mini grids, and with the goal of just showing and developing a framework that would allow for scale up for similar type of interventions. The final one is another UNDP program, which we have secured another $2.6 million in grant, but this is focused on solar home systems distribution. I think what is reoccurring in everything I've said as I close is the fact that we're open for business. The REA is leading in this space, and we're ready to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Engineer, for setting the tone for our discussion this afternoon. I think we'll just jump in right away. The Nigerian market, like I keep saying, is a market that everybody talks about, everybody wants to probably get into. So it's good to know, what's operating and what are the issues. We should take one more presentation. Ashipa, do you have your presentation? Okay, so we want to hear from Okra, but maybe once we are ready, I think we're having some technical issues. So we just jump into discussions. Let me start from are we ready? Okay. So let me just start from Ashipa Electric. We're looking at Nigerian markets, okay, and we're talking about the business and investment opportunities. As a private sector player who also operates in that market, can you just give us an idea of, number one, what your company is doing, and what's your view about the opportunities that exist in this market from your experience in Nigeria?
Perfect. Nigerian market is huge. Let me start with that. And let me also introduce myself. My name is Ajala, founder and CEO of Ashipa Electric. At Ashipa Electric, We build and operate distributed renewable energy projects, microgrids, mini grids, CNI, and also entire generation, distribution, and metering for off-grid, mini-grid, or peri-urban clients. And why are we doing this? Which kind of segue into your question, why this market and why this market is huge. Well, let's take a quick backstory on just the transition of energy generation. Over the past 100 years, when we think of power, we think of large centralized generation, large transmission, distribution, and then customers at the end paying for power. Across the globe, there's been significant development in different areas. In some areas, they haven't seen that development. Take Nigeria, for example. Out of 200 million population, about 90 million do not have access to electricity. The remaining that have access have limited access to electricity. And what do they do as the replacement? To augment that energy, they run diesel generator and the likes. That can be very expensive. Over the past 20 years, with the advent and the growth of, the reducing cost of solar, reducing cost of energy storage, primarily driven by the growth of electric vehicles, the cost of building power, managing power from the bottom up has become more commercially viable. So if you look at off-grid communities across Nigeria, look at peri-urban communities where there are lots of industrial commercial clients, or commercial entities that are running diesel generator 24/7, using solar and energy storage would be a lot more would be a lot better for them because it will reduce the overall cost of power. In some cases, by up to 30 to 50%. So those are the clients that we are targeting, and that is where we believe that there's a huge opportunity. Of course, and some of this project can require significant capital. And the program that REA has available and several other initiatives that have been put in place have catalyzed and helped entrepreneurs come in and build the foundation, and then just help them catalyze at the early stage so that they can grow viable businesses and eventually become more commercially viable on their own. So that's just summarizes the opportunity, the history behind that opportunity, and in the long run, we look to continue to play in this market.
Thank you so much. I'll still come back to you on specific projects that you've done, the capacity, and just sharing your experience. Let me come to PowerGen. All right. I know you're in this space of mini grid development. I've had the opportunity of visiting one of your mini grids in Sierra Leone, and yes, we know the capacity that you carry. Now, there's this issue of productive use appliances, where capacity of mini grids can be further deployed if you introduce productive use equipment. And I know in Sierra Leone, there's going around before you guys go into Nigeria. What's your experience? What's the possibility in Nigeria? And also, sharing with us some of those projects you've done in Nigeria, and also what's the role of productive use appliances?
Okay, thanks. I'll start with the introduction. So I'm Fahari Wasi. I'm part of PowerGen Renewable. I'm going to be the leading renewable private utility in the continent. We are in 6 countries. Currently, 20% of our connections come from Nigeria, so we've grown quite a bit. Currently, we're managing about 25,000 connections in the continent, and we are excited by the Nigeria market. And in terms of productive use, we have from our different markets that we have: Tanzania, Kenya, Sierra Leone. We've been keen on experimenting on productive use. Currently, where we're at, we see that productive use customers normally contribute about 50% of the revenue, while they consist only 20% of our connections. So quite a big impact. In terms of experience in Nigeria, we have worked with cross-boundary and other partners to experiment in terms of putting in electrification appliances. For example, currently we're doing retrofitting for mills, where we basically replace diesel to be able to um, have the customers use electricity, which is cheaper um, to basically run their mills and make more profits. In terms of productive use experience, we feel that it's a market that's still growing, quite early stage. The biggest challenge that we do have is in terms of access to energy efficient equipment. Where, for example, when we started doing the retrofitting and trying to get customers to use appliances, the appliances that were available in the local market were generally less efficient. So you have um, the customers always complaining either it's too expensive for them, etc. So it's quite important to have energy efficient equipment. When we do introduce them, customers have high demand for it. Um, sell, we basically sell within 2 days when we have fairs, for example, and customers are willing to make the purchase for productive use equipment because they see that it enables them to use much more power efficiently and to be able to grow their businesses. Yep.
Thank you so much for your comments. Let me come to you, Barbara. The growth that we've seen in the DRE space, distributed renewable energy projects development in Nigeria, has been exciting in the past few years. In addition to the role that the rural electric has played, what will you see as the drivers, the demand drivers for DRE projects in Nigeria? Why is everybody looking at Nigeria? What are the drivers? So, so that potential investors, we know that, look, these are what they should look out for. These are drivers of, project development in Nigeria.
Is this working? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Segun. So, introduction, my name is Barbara Izilein, Senior Advisor to the MDs and CEO of the Rural Electrification Agency. I also head the Solar Power Niger program that provides the facility that the executive director spoke about earlier. I think the first driver is demand. Nigeria has a huge deficit and a huge demand ready to pay for reliable power, right? The first part of it was identifying the need, but then we realized it wasn't profitable. Just having the demand alone wasn't profitable. And so with the grant in place, with the Nigeria Electrification Project providing 40 to 60% grant for SHS and for $600 per connection for mini grid, that's a huge de-risking factor for the sector. So why would people, come into Nigeria? One, there's demand, and two, we have guaranteed funds that de-risk your transaction. As of today, I don't think we've spent up to 20% of the total amount, $550 million. And the funds are readily available. I think PowerGen has been a huge beneficiary of that. And Ashipa they've signed their grant agreement and are planning to come on board. I would say also we have a lot of DFIs playing in this space, with REAN providing a lot of awareness, REA having this off-grid stakeholder engagement. What we're trying to do is to channel the resources into the required areas that are of demand, right? One of it is productive use. We realize that just having a mini grid in a community where people just use electricity to, to see or to charge their phones was not enough. We realized a huge component of that was to ensure that there's productive use. And so we also have a grant that gives a maximum of 15% for productive use. So REA has identified the need and also looking at the long-term sustainability plan. And we realized that we can't just invite people to come and invest in the space without de-risking the sector. Like Edie mentioned, there are a number of areas, right, that we're already de-risking it and providing the required support. we have a number of organizations that are providing capacity building support and other support in the space. So you're not coming to Nigeria and looking for where to have your mini grids. We have online data access, IPs. We have a number of data tools that are used to spot where these locations are and also makes it easy to deploy capital. So you're not just going to go, Nigeria is huge, by the way. You're not going to start running around the country. You have an idea where the clusters are and you can think of the solution. Would this be a mini grid or would this be SHS or like the Okra team would say, the microgrid or the mesh grid, I beg your pardon. Right. So different solutions are available. And in some cases, we have a lot of data available. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Very interesting market. I think there was a report I read that in Nigeria we have potentially commercially viable mini grid centers between 8,000 to 10,000 that has been proven to be commercially viable. Very interesting. Thanks for that. Let me come to engineer. Let me allow you rest a bit. Over to you to give us an idea, from Okra Solar. I don't know. You ready? Good.
Sweet. Thanks. Push the button. There we go. They've given us the preferential treatment as a sponsor, giving us a presentation. Cool. So yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit of background around Okra and what we're doing in Nigeria. So when we first told our investors that we're going to enter the Nigerian market, our investors asked me, they're like, "Are you mad?" And I'm like, well, I may be personally a little bit mad, but I think if you're into energy access and you're not in the Nigerian market, then you're probably mad. So let me give you some of the data why. So as the colleagues over here have said, Nigeria is the biggest off-grid opportunity on this planet. So not only do 80 to 90 million people not have access to electricity, but they are spending more on diesel per capita than any country on the planet. So they're spending more than $22 billion a year on diesel in total. And on the off-grid side, people are spending more than $3 billion a year on diesel. So that means people are already paying for electricity. This is a captive market. They should just be connected to much more affordable renewable electricity. So by my basic calculations, with 3 years worth of current money spent on off-grid diesel, we could energize every off-grid Nigerian with clean and affordable, reliable electricity. So I think you'd be mad not to think like this is a great opportunity. Here's some data. I'm not sure how closely you can see it, but on the left-hand side, we have the number of sites, so that the yellow dots showing the number of sites between 500 and 2,500 households. On the right-hand side, we have the number of sites with less than 500 households. And these are all off-grid sites, so they don't have access to electricity. And so the left-hand side makes sense for grid extension and also mini-grids. Mini-grids in the vast majority of these places because the grid has a lot of challenges already. The right-hand side, though, less than 500 households, typically the mini-grid developers are like, all right, these are a little bit too small for us to make commercially viable. But we do need a solution that provides productive use of energy to these communities because they're already spending a lot of money on diesel. So at Okra, we've built mesh grids. So mesh grids are a technology that bridge the gap between solar home systems. So, you can install it anywhere really flexibly, and mini grids. So providing enough power for productive use of energy, which is very important. How it works is you can install a system as just like a standalone solar home system. The difference is you can actually interconnect these standalone systems into a mesh grid. And then our software algorithms will share the power, effectively aggregating all of the PV and the storage and taking it to where it's needed. So this enables high power consumption for productive residential use. And all of this is monitored and controlled through our software platform. So I'm not sure if you can see this, but the picture on the left is a mini grid. It's an idealized mini grid where you've got your powerhouse in the center, and then you would take the distribution out to the last household. So you need to extend the distribution along length. You need thick conductors, and sometimes you need to step up the voltage to minimize the power loss. All of these things cost money, a fair bit of money on the distribution side. On the right-hand side, you've got mesh grids. As you can see, the households that are close to each other, interconnected into clusters. And because power goes from one node to the next, you don't need thick conductors because you're only sending a small amount of power a small distance. You also don't need to interconnect between the clusters, although you can if you like. So if we look at a technology comparison, I'm not saying there's no room for mini grids. There definitely is room for mini grids. So commercial centers, if you're talking, mills, centralized cold chains, high power commercial use, you need a mini grid basically. However, they do cost more money, and it takes time to get the land permits, etc. But there is a place for mini grids. But what about all of the other communities that still need productive energy? Well, a solar home system isn't typically providing this productive energy. So mesh grids are costing basically the same as a solar home system, but enables households to get 1.2 kilowatts of AC power output. So that's refrigeration, pumping, electric cooking, all of the household residential productive use that's required. So now I'm going to dig in a little bit. We've already touched upon it on the REA side, but from an international company coming into Nigeria, I just want to highlight how easy the REA and the regulators have made it to run sustainable businesses in Nigeria. So firstly, on the regulation side, if you're a private developer, you can operate. If it's less than 100 kilowatts, you do not require a license, and you can charge a cost-reflective tariff. So that means if a community is harder to reach, more expensive to service, you can raise your tariff to run a sustainable model. And this is really, really, really important. And Nigeria is leading the way here. Then you've got the NEP, the $550 million National Electrification Program. And I'll dig into only three parts. The performance-based grant for mini-grid developers. After connection, a mini-grid developer will get a subsidy. 6 million has been dispersed so far. Then you've got the OBF, the output-based fund for solar home system companies. 13 million has been dispersed post-connection for a solar home system. And then the MST is going to be coming out later this year, enabling developers to bid for lots of projects, and the developer that comes in with a minimum subsidy request will be able to get that. So let's dig in a little bit for the developers and also the investors to understand how these unit economics actually work and how this program is really incentivizing more connections. So firstly with the PVG, I've talked to a number of developers, and the nominal capacity being deployed is roughly 50 to 100 watts of PV per household connected. And the cost per connection is roughly $1,100. And after a $600 subsidy coming from the NEP program, that leads to a net $500 connection, which is really incentivizing more and more mini grids to be deployed. On the right-hand side, we've got the OBF. It subsidizes solar home systems, and mesh grids are coming out under the solar home systems because it's effectively solar home systems that you can interconnect and provide higher power output with. So we've got the 200 watt system, which provides 2 to 4 times the power of a typical PV capacity of a typical mini grid connection. It's costing about $550 and gives a $346 subsidy. So this is really giving good economics for developers to deploy. And we've got the XL kit, which has 900 watt peak of capacity. So that's 9 to 18 times the nominal PV of an average mini grid connection, costing $1,300, and the NEP is subsidizing it with $1,000 per connection. So it's a really, really attractive market to be entering right now. And so here is what we've done in Nigeria so far. Just last year, we piloted with a proof of concept, 7 households. You have to start somewhere, right? 7 households is pretty small. But we pushed that and we showed all the developers, and so far we've got 5 partners that we're actually rolling out projects with. And to give you one example, there's a 200 household project in Ondo State. The average revenue per user is 3,100 Naira. And after subsidy over a 12-year period, this is forecasting a 13% IRR. So you can actually make money from serving these people in the most last mile, hardest to reach areas while unlocking opportunities for them. And you can see at the bottom, there's a chart which just shows the variation of load. And it's just important to highlight the average load is going from like 30 watt hours per day, which is very, very little, all the way up to a kilowatt hour per day. You wouldn't be able to serve this with a solar home system, but with the flexibility of the mesh grid and also with mini grids, you can serve this load. So, yeah, I'd just like to finish off. You know, I'm not Nigerian, but I've come to the Nigerian market, and I just came about 3 days ago. And one of the things I wanted to highlight is, you know, they don't call it the giant of Africa for no reason. Like when you get there, you will understand and you will feel the optimism. And also the intellect and the business mind behind what is definitely, in my opinion, going to be, you know, everyone achieving SDG 7 in the Nigerian market. The regulations are there, the subsidies are coming there, the developers are there, and I think if we can achieve this in Nigeria, which I genuinely believe we will, it can be a great showcase for all the other markets in the world to follow.
Thank you so much, Afnan, for this presentation. Very interesting. Yeah, so we've heard both from, you know, can I use the word regulator, REA, and also, you know, players like Okra Solar, you know, Ashipa Electric and PowerGen. And it looks very interesting that this is a market really to be, with a lot of incentives like you showcase now. And I want to ask, let me come to the Executive Director Technical of the REA. So what would be your recommendation, sir, to funding, you know, bodies, international funding agencies, investors, in what opportunity they can come take in Nigeria? Funding partners on what further support could be provided for this sector as, you know, opening up a business opportunity even for their investment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So to just answer that simply, I'd say there's enough room for funding support. However, some of that needs to go into technical assistance because we continue to see the need to handhold developers, some developers, in, you know, going through the due diligence requirement. So what Okra maybe didn't say is that we have a very steep due diligence requirement to be able to, you know, access the fund. So not steep in a prohibitive way, but just to provide the necessary due diligence. The second part to this is, in terms of the funding type, we would, of course, encourage concessionary financing, given that, you know, the payback for some of these projects are not, they take maybe 7 years in some cases. So some concessionary, long tenor, cheap financing. Yeah, pretty much.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, Barbara, is there any room for, you know, tender in this space, you know, including technical assistance or co-investment under the RBF, for example? Is there any, what's the future for tendering? Maybe for sites, mini grids, or project development, energizing education, for example. Is there an outlook for tendering?
Okay. So I would use this opportunity to talk about the Solar Power Niger program. Basically, the RA has put his money and the federal government has put his money where the mouth is. So we're not just saying, come and play in the space. We're also providing financing, local currency financing at low interest rates. However, there's need for foreign currency financing for a lot of these companies. The Solar Power Niger program seeks to encourage local manufacturing and assembly, mini grids, and also the SHS. And to do this, some components will still need funding, will still need to come from outside the country, right? There's a huge component for result-based financing in partnership with the existing programs, and there are a number of programs like the ED had already listed, which I'll try not to list again. But I would speak about some like the EAP, Energizing Agriculture Program has a facility from Rockefeller. However, a huge component of that facility is to bring additional investment from other companies. So they'll do the background study, the preparedness model, and they may provide some sort of capex grant, but they still rely heavily on other investors coming to play in the space. Similar thing with the Solar Power Nigeria program, we have $350 million but disbursed in local currency. We're providing capital, but there's huge component for the local parties. If we deploy all the funding towards achieving or towards meeting the needs, we won't go very far. But if we partner with other investors, we believe that we'll be able to reach a wider spectrum of people and also communities. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So what we're saying is the supports that we've seen from, REA, for example, is to create a leverage, okay, and attract foreign investors into the market. With the kind of numbers that Okra just shared, the kind of subsidy you can get per connections, I think it's the right time to jump in, like you mentioned, right? Okay, thank you so much. Now, PowerGen, what's your engagement and relationship, for example, with utilities? Is there, are you running your shop, mini grid, off grid in your own site, and the utilities are also running their? Is there a meeting point currently?
Yes, we are actually starting to engage quite well with utilities. Glad to report that we actually recently signed an MOU with Abuja Electric to connect a town called Toto. Basically, what we aim to do in Toto is to build an interconnected grid where we buy power from Abuja Electric and then also supplement it with our solar. Concurrently, what we aim to do is to improve the grid stability and reliability within Toto, as well as manage the customer management end. So improve the customer experience. We are working with utilities at the moment, and what we want to push towards is to have a win-win project together with the utilities where they are incentivized as well as us to ensure that it works for the community. What we've seen so far is the most important thing is trust. So being open, communicating for all stakeholders. And we are glad with the partnerships that we've had and the work that NAC has as well, because they've been quite instrumental in helping us work with the utilities, with the regulations, as well as giving us the right contracts to push this thing forward. It's quite good. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we're seeing, a working relationship between, utilities and even, DRE companies, collaborating to ensure that, energy access is created. Differently from maybe some markets where you see competition, right?
Exactly.
Thank you. For Ashipa Electric, is there any room for improvement? Access to finance. Let's talk about access to finance. Any room for improvement? And what kind of structure will you, as a player, recommend in terms of financing? Is it blended, or is it, a one-way funding? What's the room for improving finance in the industry in Nigeria?
Well, the industry in Nigeria, it's they're part of the reason why REA is providing a lot of this program is to make it easy for early stage companies to begin and then grow into more mature companies so that they can access perhaps commercial loans to serve bankable customers and the likes at some point. And a lot of the many developers may find it difficult to raise funds internationally because of forex, and also in some cases, some of the communities that they go to, it's tough to be able to finance projects in those communities solely off of raising debt and equity and the likes. So as the industry continue to grow, as the early stage companies continue to build a huge portfolio and actually build a viable business, it will be a lot easier for them to access funds. So the initiative that RE has provided is providing at this point is very critical to help the early stage companies to grow. And a lot of international financiers being able to understand the market and leverage the initiatives that are available globally to de-risk the funds that can be, for example, developers in Nigeria now, they're thinking more of local financing, local currency, in order to ensure that they limit the exposure to forex. Now, beyond just looking at local financing, is there an avenue through which maybe the likes of TCX to be able to access naira from international financiers? Those are things that needs to be evaluated and ensure, because to serve the huge market in Nigeria, local financing is not enough. We need more foreign financing. So how can we continue to de-risk the foreign financing to increase the volume of financing in the market to satisfy the demand in the market? So those are things to be looked at. And with developers themselves, beyond just focusing on mini grids or SHS and the likes, is there a need to diversify their offerings in order to I guess, in order to self mitigate the potential exposure that they have if they're only focusing on just off grid communities that most of the clients cannot pay for power? Can they do CNI as well as mini grid in order to mix that client base in order to increase their capacity to raise funds to satisfy their customers and the like? So there's so many different approaches to do that.
Thank you so much. I know we have questions from the audience. I'm going to turn it to the audience very shortly. But before I do that, I want to ask you, Adnan, mesh grid looks like a new concept. I mean, I've heard of mini grid, micro grid, the super grid, mesh grid. Is it? Are you testing this in Nigeria for the first time, or you've done it in other markets? Maybe in few sentences.
Yeah, sure. Super grid. I haven't heard of the super grid. I want one of those. Yeah, so the mesh grid, we did our first pilot project in the Cambodian market. We demonstrated that it can actually work. The average load per household in our flagship project in Cambodia is 550 watt hours per day. So that's more than half a kilowatt, demonstrating the productive use of energy that can be drawn from these grids. Unfortunately, Cambodia does not have the progressive regulatory climate that a place like Nigeria does. So basically, the government has said that they're monopolizing the utility. They're not letting any private player play in the space. So then we entered the Nigerian and Haiti market. And an interesting fun fact is, well, it's not so fun, but a fact is that the president of Haiti was actually assassinated in the middle of last year. And while the president was assassinated and there is no leader of the country, we've had more than 300 connections be installed because simply the local people, we still need power, even if there's no power structure. And that's the beauty of decentralized energy. But ultimately, I think Nigeria is, the place where you either, you either succeed or you burn, because it is a very challenging market in many ways, but it's also the market where you need to prove it works in order to be able to scale globally. So that's where we're basically focused going forward.
Thank you so much. So the regulatory environment also encouraged you to, test this concept better in Nigeria. Interesting. Now over to the audience. Please, if you have questions, yes.
Hi, thanks for an excellent panel. A quick question on the REA subsidy program. How are those per connection subsidies estimated and offered? How do you determine how much? And whether there's a mechanism to review those as costs vary for technology and otherwise. And also, as developers grow and the number of connections they deploy grows, probably their costs also reduce for every marginal connection they make. So does it still continue to make sense to offer the same fixed per connection subsidy, or does that need to vary as well?
Great question. So recently, I would say in October last year, we reviewed the grant amount. We realized that even with providing, initially it was $350 per connection for mini grid and 7 to 20% per connection for the SHS, depending on the capacity. So we've got 5 tiers. The highest end was 20%, lowest end was 7%. We realized that there were a number of challenges, duties, forex issues, and we're disbursing in naira and a number of things that were, affecting the viability of the grant. So what we did was to review it upwards, right? So we increased the grant for the mini grid per connection to $600 and increased the grant for the solar home systems from 7 to 20% to 40% on the highest tier and 60% for the lower capacity. However, we ensure that 20% is more of an end user subsidy. So 20% of whichever capacity, either you qualify for the 40% or 60%, is to reduce the cost of the systems to the end user. The program allows for us to review over time. As we know, the more you deploy into the country, the more the industry for assembly grows, the price will crash. So we're constantly doing a review of prices, checking, of course, different continents and what the prices are and what the price is in the country at the moment to manage that price. We believe that after deploy, if we could support the local industry significantly, the price will crash. And then we can now go back and review the grant amount. Yes, but we're actually watching that. And again, because it forms a significant part of the investment strategy. So an example is PowerGen goes to an investor. They say, you know what, in 3 months, we have $600 coming in per connection. We know that it's a business model that has to be reviewed all the time to ensure that it meets the need or the demand that is supposed to be meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, just to also add something very important. The review process is ongoing, like Barbara said, and it is for the reason that we are now considering interconnected connections as well. Initially, it was focused on off-grid connections, but we continue to see that there is a need to look at underserved people who are connected to the grid. So there are claims for connections on the grid right now.
Thank you so much. Questions? Yes. Please, the mic here.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. My name is Nema Shayo, and I'm from the Norwegian Embassy here in Dar es Salaam. I just wanted to get a little bit of 2 cents from the rural electrification agents. Could you explain a little bit how do you, from your experience when it comes to tariff issues, balancing? I know your mandate is to also electrify those rural customers where there will be low-income households. So just to get a little bit of a practical experience from your side, how do you sort of balance the tariff issue? And then the second question is, could you speak a little bit on the grid has arrived and how are you trying to compensate these companies?
Okay, I think there are 2 questions there. You asked about tariffs, and then you asked about what happens when the grid arrives. So these 2 questions are actually answered by the regulation. The mini grid regulation is very elaborate. As Okra pointed out, for projects that are sized 100 kilowatts and below, there is the flexibility to actually decide on your tariffs. Above that, there is a framework, that you need to negotiate with the regulator. So for most of our projects, the idea behind the grant is to further reduce what the end user tariff would be. So depending on what's needed, that you would need to bring to match whatever funding that we're providing in terms of grant, that is calculated and negotiated eventually with the regulator with the aim of reducing the end user tariff. For what happens when the grid arrives, I think there are about 3 options, if I remember correctly, but it's in the regulation. There's a conversation about the compensation for the investment that has not been recouped by the investor of the mini grid. There is also the consideration for the disco to, of course, take on the generating asset and continue to supply the community. But typically, before you even set out to go to a site, you need to get clearance from the regulator in terms of exclusivity for that location. And this is done by checking on the grid extension plan of the utility.
Just to add to what the ED mentioned is we have the multi-year tariff order, which different categories fall under or fall into. And that requires you to put in your capex, put in the grant amount to get what the tariff should be, right? So the regulator for the sector actually reviews the tariff to ensure that you've put in the right calculations. Again, their rule of thumbs, expected cost, and at that point is queried, right? The grant for the mini grid is expected to reduce your capex. And so the template is there and that fits into the model and it's reviewed. Again, something else that realize over time is the sector regulates itself. So if you deploy a mini grid in a location and you put a very high tariff, people just won't use the power. So you realize that your investment is there and people will turn off the light and won't pay you. So it's in your own interest now to have a tariff that is affordable, that people are willing to pay over time, because the business model is built on revenue generation over, let's say, 5 to 7 years, depending on the structure of the transaction. So you want to be sure that the tariff is reduced or is at least affordable based on the location. So you have different tariffs for different locations depending on the cost. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. 1 or 2 more questions. We are running out of time, so that I don't take you. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Ridley Makaliki from the SADC Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency in Namibia. My question goes to Okra in relation to the meshed grid. Traditionally, I think on the grid, the more you interconnect, the more complicated your protection system should for you not to collapse the system once there's a fault. So I wanted to find out from you, what's the maximum number of these individual mini grids you can connect into a meshed grid? And the level of protection now you put in, does it affect the final tariff to your customer? Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for your question, my friend from Namibia. So basically the beauty of the mesh grid is that each system is actually isolated from the distribution bus. And it is an infinitely scalable system, which means you can theoretically connect an infinite number of households while maintaining the power loss at a steady level. So that's high level. Let me explain at the low level how that works. So basically, imagine we're all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 households. Okay. So there's a distribution bus that goes along that end to here. And so if my power is low and I need extra power, then my system will connect to the bus. And then if Segun's power is high or his battery is full, then his system will connect to the bus. So the power will come from Segun's household to my household. It's not actually traveled from there to here. So the power loss is only over a distance of like 20 meters. And when there is no need for excess power, each system is actually isolated. So if lightning strikes Segun's house or my house goes on fire and my system is now offline. But the rest of the households are still able to connect and disconnect from the bus whenever they need. The next thing is for each 5 households, we include a surge protection device on the distribution network. So if lightning strikes a distribution network, then 5 households will come offline, but the rest will continue. And then the final bit I will say is, imagine we want to add another 20 households down the line, or if you want to add 20,000 households down the line, the power is only going to go from where it's generated to the nearest house that needs it. So unlike a centralized system where it has to travel 20,000 households, the power is never going to travel 20,000 households, which means the power loss is always maintained in a distributed mesh network.
Thank you. So, yes. Then I'll come to you and then
Thank you so much. Thank you all for your great presentations and how you respond to some of the questions. So my name is Eliud from PowerGen. I have a question to Rhea or to some of the panelists who will be willing to respond to that. So one of the key success factor for the mini grid is the electricity usage. But most of the challenge has been on the availability of efficient, quality, and affordable appliances. And it's because of the growth of the sector. So how is REA in Nigeria is looking to sort this kind of challenge to ensure that these appliances, whether it's a productive usage, are efficient, quality, and affordable, so that the mini grids can be more profitable in the country?
Hello. Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Yes, you're right. Like maybe mini grids that were built maybe 10 years ago. I think the focus was just on use for residential purposes and all of that. But there's a paradigm shift right now. We're thinking towards productive use. For the new mini grids, I think it's just part of the consideration from the onset. In fact, under the NEP program, I think if you followed, we actually pointed out that there was some funding for productive use. So the idea is to look at the appliances and ensure that they speak to productive use, but not only speaking to productive use, but in an efficient manner. I think it was PowerGen or Ashipa that spoke about retrofitting mills. All right. So even though you want to connect for productive use, one thing we've seen is that all of the starting current, for example, for some of these traditional machines is really high. So there's a need to reconfigure them. So we're looking at that already. And for new mini grids that we build, we tend to focus on ensuring that there's a significant consideration for productive use.
Thank you. Just to add, sorry, just very quickly, is like the ED mentioned, we have about $20 million for productive use, and this funding is to reduce the cost by 50%. Typical example is, assuming a community, they identify their need, and they come to the REA and say, we want a rice meal. This is the cost of the rice meal. We have 50%, or we'll finance 50% through the structure. REA will disburse the 50% balance. Also, this is easy for new mini grids because, like Edie said, you can easily incorporate that. But what we've also started doing is to train people where there are already existing mini grids. So some of these mini grids were deployed for consumers, just household consumers. We've gone into these communities, we've identified this location, we started training them. What do you want to do? You could have a milling machine, you could have this. So we're training them now, all these communities, on what potential productive use equipment they can use, and also letting them know the process of accessing the grant. We also have another project called the Energizing Agriculture Program that is looking to provide either energy reduction in the capex for agro clusters. So currently they're identifying these clusters and trying to identify the need. And also the plan is to design a business model that works within those clusters. But ultimately the plan is to provide grants to these clusters so that they can be properly energized. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any final? Okay, we have two more. Yes, himself, and then you final. I think we have less than 7 minutes, and I don't want to take too much of your time.
Thank you very much. So my question goes to Rhea. I just want to get your comment on the RBF schemes and whether you find them effective and the kind of strain they're bringing to, let's say, working capital for mini developers. Is there any kind of restructuring out of your experience? I'm talking mostly based on the PBG grant. I'm sure you're aware of it, the rare PBG. Yeah. My name is Tilen Ogola and I'm from Energy for Impact. Thank you.
Speak about that again. The mini grid provides is a performance-based grant, meaning you should have deployed. However, the Solar Power Nigeria program is seeking to provide capital for you to deploy so you can qualify for the grant. So realize that having a grant was not enough. People were still not able to get capital. So now under the SPN program and also with our partners and other partners we'll get from this event, we are providing capital to companies like the PowerGen and the likes and other developers so that they can qualify for the grant. Our aim is to disperse as much as possible and increase energy access. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Finally, yes.
Mine is just a comment. My name is Victor Kitange from Common Secretariat, and I should commend you for an excellent display of how you have promoted the Nigerian energy sector, particularly renewable sector. 20 billion revenue potential, I think that was the number that can be generated from the industry, and a whole package of fiscal incentives that you have kind of lined up. And there was the question that was actually going through my head was, what is it holding up investment? What are the three key things you think is holding up people not rushing in? I know those numbers are significant. And what are the kind of solutions would you recommend or are you thinking to unlock that problem?
Yeah, I think is a good question to be able to use to wrap up the session. So you said three, right? So I'll give you my own top three. Data, all right? There's a need to, so data exists in different, in silos. Then there's a need to bring things together to enable, a central planning. There's pipeline. Many developers know where they want to go to, but there's need to do some more work. Investors want to see the returns clearly. They want to be able to see the projections. And then finally is the structure of the capital. And that's why we're here anyway. We're hearing from developers, we're hearing from participants. If you tailor this way, it becomes very easy to access. If you add this layer of grant, it helps to de-risk. So I think these are the top three for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this point, we need to wrap up. And I'll just say in 5 seconds, starting from Olugbenga, what will be a closing shot? 5 seconds.
5 seconds. Nigeria market is huge. Lots of initiatives that is available to help developers participate in the market. Though many of the developers are still at the early stage, there is, well, I guess it's over. Many of the developers are still at the early stage, but with this initiative, it is the future of distributed development in Nigeria is very bright.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks. For me, parting shot will be Nigeria is ready for investment. Big thing that we need to do is to manage FX risk. So more financing, more blended finance, more credit enhancement tools are what we need. Yeah.
Over to you, Barbara.
From my end, I would say resources are available within the REA and they are the right parties to work with, right? If you're an investor, come talk to the REA. We would show you what to do, would help you know the programs are available, and we would also provide some sort of comfort that you may need from the developers. We have deep insight into the
time to come and for also our guests, for time to sit and listen. At this point, I'll hand over to you, sir.
Thank you. And it was going to be good. It was. I congratulate the Excel panel and the colleagues of Nigeria for the excellent work. I can only sum up exactly to what they say. I've been working 5 years in West Africa in the ECOWAS context, and really I felt always very safe, very well in Nigeria. So I can only sum up to what they say. And it's over. We have crossed the whole continent from south to east and west. I really enjoyed. I learned a lot in this panel and Uganda. Things are moving. Now it's time to shake the body. Also, going to be another reception up there in the terrace at 6:30. But before there is the masking. I don't forget, Julia. And then I think it's done. Let's enjoy the day, and tomorrow we start again. I think you have to take a family picture. Thank you. Bye bye.